I'm Manuel Martins, a master's student from the University of Exeter. Today I'm going to talk to you about my master's project, in which I looked at the effect of non-climatic barriers like geographical barriers and species innates on species distributions. I did this because it is widely accepted that climate plays a key role in species spatial ecology. However, true knowledge on the effects of non-climatic factors is not that great. So in my project, I tried to understand what is the true effect of species innates and geographical barriers in species distributions. I do this by analyzing the distributions of the family Felidae, since it is a family that is globally distributed, likely to encounter all sorts of geographical barriers, and there's a lot of variations in the life history of traits that I use. Now, the rationale behind my approach is based on the evidence that species rarely occupy the totality of the climatic suitable areas available to them, which tells me that there's something else impacting their distributions other than climate. So what I did was, via species distribution modeling, I estimated the species' potential climatic range within the mammal-specific geographic areas where they occur, drawn by Elf et al. And then I was able to see what proportion of these climatic suitable areas were actually occupied. I was able to estimate the species range filling. And then I dove into the analysis of what were the effects of non-climatic barriers on their range filling. As I told you, I looked at innate traits, I looked at age of sexual maturity, habitat breadth, and dispersal ability, and then I wanted to see which one imposed the biggest cost to movement beyond the species' current limit distributions. Would it be climate, or would it be elevation? The first thing I saw from my methodology was that feline species occupy a fairly low proportion of the climatic suitable areas available to them, around 49% of range filling within the geographic area where they occur. And just to give you an idea of how this looks like, here you have the orange polygon, that's the distribution of feline species, and the darker green areas are the areas that are actually climatically suitable. So this is how 49% of range filling looks like. And then, when I analyzed the effect of traits on this range filling, I found out that variation in habitat breadth does bring us a variation in the species' ability to colonize climatic suitable areas. And this is the case because habitat generalists occupy on average 58% of the climatic suitable areas available, while specialists only occupy around 32%. And this was the only trait that seemed to have an effect. And then I was very curious about the effect of elevation. So I estimated the cost of dispersal based on elevation and based on climatic suitability in order for the species to move beyond the current limits of its distribution. I did this using a GIS function called cost distance that told me the cost of dispersal between each cell based on a classification of cost that I adhered to each cell. Then I was able to plot cost, and if I got a graph like the one on the left, where most cost is concentrated in the smallest cost range, I could see that in order for that species to move beyond the current limits of its distribution, it would not be a costly process. However, if you have a graph like the one on the right, here you see that most cost values are concentrated in the bigger cost range. So I can see that in order for these species to move beyond its limits, it is indeed a very costly process. However, just looking at these graphs didn't really tell me whether elevation or climate were imposing the biggest barrier. So what I did was, I estimated the skewness of each graph, which allowed me to see where the cost values were mostly concentrated, so I could get an idea of which one was imposing the biggest barrier. And I also estimated the kurtosis of each graph, so I could get an idea of how spread that cost actually was. And from this methodology, I was able to see that actually elevation is a stronger barrier to species dispersal than climate. So what were my main takeaways from my master's project? First of all, my methodology is applicable to a wide variety of taxa. However, further research into species life history traits is needed to gauge their true effect. Felines fill a small proportion of their potential climatic range, especially habitat specialists, and elevation is the biggest barrier to dispersal in order for felines to move the current limits of their distribution. That's it.
Time for questions? Richard? just wondering what you think about the idea that elevation is just a case of climate, basically. So as you go up in elevation, you change the climate.
Yeah, I did look into that. There's a strong correlation, but what I did was basically I reclassified each. So I had the rasters of climatic suitability, and I had the rasters based on only on elevation. And when I reclassified, but just by estimating the cost based on solely elevation, it did come back saying that elevation by itself is the greatest barrier to movement. However, there is the fact that it could be related with climatic suitability as well.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.